La seguridad es lo más importante en el sitio de trabajo. Un sitio de trabajo seguro es un sitio de trabajo productivo. Hay que tener en cuenta que la seguridad es vital en esta industria. Tenemos que saber cómo utilizar las herramientas adecuadamente, ya sea herramientas neumáticas o herramientas eléctricas. Además, recuerda siempre usar tu casco, tus lentes de seguridad, y también es importante que tomes en serio tu trabajo. No estés jugando en los sitios de área de trabajo, estés concentrado en lo que estás haciendo.
Before you begin your drywalling job, clean up where you'll be working. You'll need an area where you can stage your drywall panels. You can use a helper to carry them or a panel carrier, which is a safe way to carry them solo. Here's a tip. Be careful when you're stacking sheets. You can end up with a ding at the corner of a panel. This is the right way. Slide panels atop each other and you won't damage them and waste materials. It costs you money. There's one more thing you have to do before you start to drywall. Go around the space and inspect nails at the bottom of all studs to make sure they're flush. If not, hammer them in. You need a flat surface for your drywall.
It's also a good time to maintain your tools so you get the best performance from them all day on the job.
Nailers require a couple of drops of oil in the air fitting of the tool first thing in the morning to keep them running smoothly. Oiling the tool regularly is the best line of defense for preserving O-ring life and the life of the tool. Take time to check the oil in the air compressor tank by looking at the gauge. Change it as needed to get the top performance from the compressor. And at the end of the day, make sure you drain the air compressor tank. The process of compressing air generates condensation in the tank, and the water needs to be drained regularly for safety and long life operation.
It's always a good idea to check your owner's manual for any information, especially when you're troubleshooting.
You also need to set up your compressor hose layout correctly. This is not the way to do it. Multiple users will draw air from a splitter, or 4 users drawing air from one small hose. You need sufficient air to drive nails. Here's the best way to set up the system. It looks like this: 2 larger hoses that split into smaller hoses, each leading to a single tool.
Before you start work, you'll need to get your hand tools ready to save yourself time later in the job. Load the blade into your utility knife and have spares. Before you begin layout, you'll load your chalk reel. This Fat Max chalk reel has a slide window to let you see how much chalk is in it. It's easy to fill. Put in the chalk, fill the reel, close it, and you can see how much chalk you've got. Last but not least, start the day by taking advantage of an organized tool belt to keep everything handy and keep you working efficiently. Now we have some tips and techniques for you that will have you framing correctly and efficiently, plus we'll show you some tool features and benefits to make your job even easier.
We want to take a quick look at wall construction to be sure you're on track for drywalling. After you frame the structure, insulation was added. This is where drywall will close in the walls and ceiling. Measuring and cutting accurately are a must when it comes to drywall. You will typically start with the ceiling, and you will use a tape measure to get the dimensions of the surface you'll be covering. The Fat Max 25-foot tape will be useful with a non-break feature. An armor coat on the measuring blade eliminates break when you're measuring. You can extend it all the way and it won't bend or break. When you've determined the space you're covering, you will use a Stanley T-square to measure and mark the panel using a T-square. Then, use a sharp utility knife to slice through the outside face of the drywall and into the sheetrock on that cut line. To finish the cut, snap the back of the panel on the cut line. Slice the back paper along the cut line with the knife. Armed with the panel you've measured and cut, you'll need a helper to lift and then get ready to attach the panel. The job will continue for the walls, and be sure you know the right fastening techniques. You typically place drywall screws in this pattern. Attach them horizontally at 16 inches on center. Vertically, you'll put in screws 6 inches apart. You will also want to attach the drywall screws at the proper depth, a technique called countersinking. See the first screw? It's too deep. On the second screw, it's at the right depth to make a smooth surface for taping and mudding later. And here's the wrong way, when the fastener is not deep enough. A common task you'll have to tackle is cutting out around windows. You will use a jab saw to make those cuts. The Stanley jab saw has a sharp tip to punch through drywall panels and cuts up to 50% faster than traditional tooth designs. For outlets, measure the panel to account for those openings and also use a jab saw for that. Then you remove the drywall piece. While we're talking about cutting, a good technique to smooth rough edges on corners or other edges is to use a Stanley Sureform planer. This is a replaceable blade and can be used with one hand. And while you're creating these openings, you'll have leftovers. Another good tip is to always save any scraps and leftovers from panels. You can use them again. Another technique you need to know is called scabbing. This involves the problem if you have a gap to fill and need a surface to screw into. As you see here, our crew adds what is actually an extra vertical stud. Now you can keep moving and have a way to attach the two surfaces. When it's time to tape and mud, you will combine your mixed joint compound and water to make the mud. You'll start the first of several mud coats to make walls and ceilings smooth and ready for paint. Start applying self-adhesive fiberglass drywall tape over the center lines of the seams, then cut off the excess. Cover the taped seams with a thin coat of mud using a 6-inch drywall knife. The first coat should not be too thick, so you can faintly see the tape. Wait until that coat dries according to the directions. The technique here is making a drywall trough. You fill the valley with enough mud so that there's no bulge. You want a flat surface, then you let it dry according to the directions for your mud. The second mud coat fills the tapered valley you've created. Using a 10-inch drywall knife, pull the mud along the seam in a band that matches the width of your knife. Again, not too thick. For the last coat, finish the filling and feather the mud onto the drywall. You'll attach what's called corner bead, which is an angled metal strip. This assures smooth corners. You should use the Stanley Bostitch finish stapler to attach it to the panels, so mudding and sanding can then take place. You'll like the rear exhaust which directs air away from the user and keeps drywall dust away from your face. Its oil-free operation requires no regular maintenance and eliminates the risk of oil stains. You'll also use the stapler around window and door casings to ensure clean edges. When all the mud coats are cured, now comes the messy part of the job, sanding. Take a pole sander with the right sandpaper and make long strokes up and down the wall to smooth it and remove bumps and ridges. Use a light touch. Now, we know that no job is perfect and you may have to do some patches or repairs. Here's how you would do a patch at 8 inches. Using your FatMax tape measure and utility knife, lock the length and place the tape edge at the end of the panel. Glide the knife blade down the panel to make a smooth cut. Pop the panel apart, then repeat the cut on the back on the panel. If you're doing non-standard or diagonal cuts, you can use your FatMax chalk reel. Be sure your reel is filled with chalk, then you can place it on a diagonal like this example. Pop the chalk line and you have a guide for your cut. Then you snap the panel apart and you're ready. Drywalling is a big job, but you'll have great results right from the start if you follow the techniques and tips you've seen in this video. We hope you've got the skills now to make it big.
We hope you've learned from this video, and there's even more information for you. Look at the resources section of this DVD for even more. You'll find helpful website addresses, a copy of our fastener guide, safety videos, a pocket translator, a list of hurricane building codes, and estimating resources.
Querido amigo, hicimos este video con muchas ganas y empeño. Esperamos que sea de gran utilidad para tu trabajo. Si requieres más información acerca de este y otros videos del programa Hazla en Grande, búscala en www.hazlaengrande.com o con tu distribuidor de herramientas Stanley más cercano. Y recuerda que tú puedes cumplir cualquier sueño o meta que te propongas. Es cuestión de ponerle mucho entusiasmo y de confiar en las herramientas adecuadas. Tú puedes hacerla. Hazla en grande con Stanley.